This is iCastNews.com, live and direct from the United Nations in New York City. And this is the Russian Boulder. Joining me, as he frequently does, is my fellow traveler, pal, and comrade,
Vladimir KIKILO. I am a news agency ITARTAS correspondent in New York City.
And Vladimir and I are going to be discussing the upcoming summit between President Barack Hussein Obama and President Medvedev, which takes place in early July in Moscow. Joining us is one of the most knowledgeable people about this situation and subject, an old Moscow hand, Tom Graham. Tom served at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and is famous for coming out in print while he was still a serving Foreign Service officer, with an article that outlined just how the oligarchs, the gang, the mafia, was taking over the government and the business inside of Russia. He has since served on the National Security Council and now works for Kissinger Associates. My colleague, Vladimir KIKILO, will begin the questioning.
Tom, thank you so much for coming.
Good to be here.
I have a privilege to ask the first question. Maybe Jonathan gave it to me because ITARTAS, my news agency, reported several days ago a very interesting meeting in Washington that was organized by Century Foundation, and it was dedicated to the same subject that we are going to discuss today, upcoming summit, Obama-Medvedev. I read very thoroughly a report of my Washington colleague, Andrei Sitov, and my question would be based partly on this report. And let me quote just 2-3 lines. He quoted you about your expectations from this summit, and you mentioned that, in your opinion, the best result that we could expect from the Russian-American summit could be putting forward positive agenda for Russia and America, which would include not only arms control. What are the questions, in your opinion, taking note and given the fact that arms control is foremost important, of course, and it has been a very important issue in Soviet-American and Russian-American relations, what are the other issues you want to emphasize that, in your opinion, should be included in agenda?
Let me start by saying, obviously the arms control issue is an important one. And I think every indication is that there will be some sort of agreement, a framework agreement, for the presidents to discuss, approve in Moscow, and this will provide guidance for the negotiating team so that we will get a treaty by the end of the year. But as I said, arms control is not sufficient. Arms control, when you think about it, is really about two countries that don't thoroughly trust one another. You're trying to limit what each country can do to the other. So you think of each other as rivals. If the American-Russian relationship is going to move forward, as I said, we need a positive agenda, areas where we're working together in a positive way to advance the interest of both countries. It's hard to say exactly what that should be at this point, in part because what each country needs to do is give a clear articulation of what their interests are and how they think the other country can help them achieve those interests, or what they should not do to get in the way of that country achieving those interests. I think for the United States, what we're looking for is some indication from Russia that they're prepared to work more closely together with us on Iran, particularly the nuclear weapons program, more broadly on the on questions of instability, war and peace in the Middle East. Obviously, we're looking for some cooperation with Russia and Afghanistan, particularly in our effort to supply our forces on the ground in Afghanistan. Beyond that, there are a number of other areas, non-proliferation, counterterrorism, where we believe the United States and Russia can work together very productively. From the Russian standpoint, it's not clear what Russia is looking for from the United States. What we hear from senior Russian leaders is, as I said in Washington, a series of what I would say are no's. No to NATO expansion, no to American missile defense in East Europe, no to American interference in the former Soviet space. Those need to be, I think, turned into positive formulations. So what does the Russian government, what do the Russian people want from the United States in a positive way that will help Russia achieve its long-term strategic goals? That, I think, needs to be the focus of the summit, and we'll only have a success if we can agree on that positive agenda.
So the point is to turn net into da.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Actually, I think they want to turn net into...
Absolutely niet.
I think really if you ask a lot of serious Russians what they'd like, and they're realistic, they would like to see less colored revolutions or no colored revolutions. They'd like us to shut up about putting missiles into Poland and radar stations into the Czech Republic. I think they'd like us to stop talking about Mr. Khodorkovsky or stop talking about the rights of Bill Broder and Hermitage. I think they'd like America just to be quieter.
Well, there's a certain element of truth in that, and to a certain extent, the Obama administration has already done that. If you think of NATO, for example, this is an administration that hasn't gone out and advocated in a forceful, energetic way the inclusion of NATO of Ukraine or Georgia. On Georgia itself, you've heard no statements out of this administration, I believe, that have been supportive of Saakashvili personally, although clearly the United States continues to support Georgia, its independence, its territorial integrity. On missile defense, the same thing. This is not an administration that has decided to move forward aggressively on missile defense, certainly not in deploying missile defense in Poland and the Czech Republic. And so what the Russians have heard is silence on some of these issues. And now I think the question is, how do you take that silence if you're a Russian leader and move forward so that the administration gradually moves in directions that you find are consistent with your national interest. On missile defense, my own opinion is that we don't need a no to missile defense. What we need is a new look at missile defense. This is a threat of the future. And it's not only Iran and North Korea that we should be worried about. Think about Pakistan, a country that has nuclear weapons, has delivery systems, and also has a very unstable government at this point, and an insurgency on the ground. You can't rule out the potential that some of those weapons will fall into the hands of wrong individuals, and someone will need a missile defense system. So what the United States and Russia should be doing is a joint assessment of what the nature of the threat is, and then what's the appropriate architecture for dealing with that threat. And I think if you do that, you'll find that adjustments need to be made, and there actually are ways the United States, Russia, can cooperate in building a missile defense system that will have the potential of defending both U.S. territory, Russian territory, European territory from future threats. And there could be nothing, I think, of greater symbolic value than the United States and Russia working together in ways that actually defend each country from a future threat.